who do you want to have over for dinner, right? That used to be the like choice people would, make often about like the president that they're electing or the vice president. I think like people would love to have Tim Walz over at a barbecue. I think like I would only last in my grill about 3 minutes and he would take over and that'd be fantastic, right? That would be great. I just couldn't see I don't know what my conversation at my grill with JD Vance would be.
Hello, thank you for joining us, and welcome to a new episode of Power and Flower. I am Seth Maskett.
And I'm John Hagner.
We are a political scientist and a political consultant who are trying to understand and explain what is going on in U.S. politics in 2024. We also care deeply about pastries. We have a special guest with us today, Joe Fuld. I got to know Joe a few years back when I was doing research for my book, Learning from Loss. He granted me a number of really helpful interviews, giving me information about how he saw Democratic campaign practitioners interpreting the 2016 election and everything that happened between 2016 and 2020. Just to introduce him, Joe Fuld is a political and advocacy consultant based in Washington, D.C. He runs a firm called the Campaign Workshop. Joe has done direct mail, digital, and creative strategies for a long list of clients, including the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, the AFT, UFCW, the Equality Federation, and the LGBTQ plus Victory Fund. Joe's firm, the Campaign Workshop, does more than simply advise candidates and create ads. It's also kind of a training facility, providing campaign and advocacy training for candidates and campaign managers, and also maintaining a useful regular podcast, How to Win a Campaign. He focuses on skills and trying to make candidates and campaigns better. So we have invited Joe on for today to discuss the current presidential race. Now, I am a typical political scientist in that I'm somewhat of a killjoy on these things. All my training tends to make me think that candidate skill is probably a bit overrated. It doesn't make too much of a difference. Then again, we had a whole summer where Joe Biden dropped out, was replaced by Kamala Harris, and the polling changed pretty dramatically from a sure Democratic loss into a possible win, suggesting that maybe I'm wrong and there's something going on here. First of all, Joe, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. It's so happy to chat with you both. And, if I can talk about politics and food at the same time, it's fantastic. I mean, what's right? It's there's nothing better.
Fantastic. Thank you for doing this.
Of course.
John, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Yeah, Joe, we're thrilled to have you on today. I know you spent a lot of your career focusing on candidate training and candidate skills. As an operative, I think I probably am a little more closer to your perspective on knowing how important these are. So I think we're going to need to convince Seth today that the candidate skills matter. But just take a step back and looking at the big picture here. How much of a campaign's outcome do you think depends on the candidate themselves, the skills, the campaign that they run, and how much do you think is just, to use a metaphor we love, baked in the cake?
So, well, we'll keep that cake metaphor and say, like, how old a cake is it, right? Is it a brand new cake that you are just putting in, or is it cake that has been around for a very long time, right? If it's the cake that you've pulled out of the freezer from your wedding 20 years ago, there's really not much that you can do to the flavor of the cake, right? So, people know, and talking about the presidential race, right? People know Donald Trump. They feel like they know what he stands for. So I would define that as old cake. Whereas I think Kamala Harris is much more a cake that most voters have not tried or engaged with. How am I doing on this analogy?
We're pushing it. You're pushing it to the edge.
But it's
not dead yet.
Well, but it's really important, right? That it's like, I think the skill of a new candidate of defining who they are and getting folks to know them at that beginning part is super important versus someone who's been around for a while and people have preconceived notions of who they are. The skill is less, I would say, pronounced because people have a preconceived notion with Donald Trump, but they don't with Kamala Harris. So that is my point, and I think Kamala's skill has really shown in the debates, and that has really been helpful for her. I think we can also talk about this on the vice presidential stuff too, which I think that has also shown some, benefits and problems. But I think it really is this, how a candidate first defines themselves and how they introduce themselves to the public, especially a new candidate, really does matter.
We talked about this in an earlier episode, but just the fact that, our last major presidential candidates have been, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, candidates that people have known for decades and have a lot of opinions about, and you're not going to really teach them a whole lot new that they don't already know about these candidates. Whereas you're right, like Kamala Harris is not unknown, but a relatively new figure. No one outside of California really knew her name before like 2019. So yeah, I guess there's people are at least open to perceptions on this. Yeah.
Yes. No, but to me, the most interesting thing that's happened over the last couple of months, and there's been a lot of interesting things, but Kamala Harris was decently well known as vice president. She was just pretty widely disliked. And the fact that over the last 2 months, her popularity has skyrocketed, I think is the most interesting public opinion trait that's happened in this election, right? That we're in a world where a lot of folks have decided that they like her. And usually we see over the course of a presidential campaign, your favorability rating starts off decent and then goes down. And we're seeing the exact opposite here. What do you think she has done, using the sort of candidate skills that you've spent so much time focusing on? What do you think she's done right to get people to like her so much more than they did 3 months ago?
Well, and again, I'll also get to, I think there's some historical perspective on this too, where people give vice presidents a little bit of a break to introduce themselves and are open to that introduction. We've seen that, like, frankly, time and time again, whether it's a George W. Bush, whether it's a Nixon, right? That there are examples of people being open to that introduction. I think Kamala Harris has shown empathy, shown engagement, has really been able to show freshness and excitement. All of that has been needed in contrast to, the current field, and frankly, in contrast to Biden. So I think that she has been able to show that difference, not just, in what she said, but how she has said it.
Yeah, one of the criticisms you hear about her is that she has been shying away from sort of the traditional media interview circuit that, a lot of reporters would like to see her do. And I think some voters, if you ask them, would say that they like. Do you think that, keeping her remarks to relatively scripted setups where, she's in control of the format and the conversation has helped her to do that? Or do you think maybe she's getting in her own way there?
I mean, I think she has done more local media interviews than she gets credit for. So I just want to say that. I mean, I think you definitely hear a lot of criticism on the national interviews, but I think, listen, I think that running for president of the United States usually is a pretty scripted endeavor. And let's just say that, I think whether, I think that, what we found with Trump is Trump likes it to be unscripted. That also hasn't benefited him as well, right? So I don't know. I mean, I think that she is, and they are choosing places. Do I think that she could do more national interviews and do well with it? I do think she could, because I think she's gifted at this. So, but I think that people, when you're running campaigns, are worried about like mistakes and sort of gotcha questions.
For sure. Yeah. And and time, right? That she is so much to do in such a short amount of time.
Absolutely.
Taking 3 hours to do interview prep and then an hour to do an interview, like that's half of your day. And she doesn't have that many days.
That's right.
And also in this really polarized environment, like we say, like she's managed to get her numbers up from where they were. Her favorability has increased. I have a hard time imagining a candidate doing a whole lot better than she's done in this environment.
I agree, and
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
discipline is super
I don't think she's
important.
made a mistake.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I think discipline is really important when you're running for president of the United States, and having discipline of who they're talking to and when they are is really important.
Yeah. I think one of the other places that you see a lot of candidate skill discussions, and Seth, I'm sorry if I interrupt you, is on the fundraising side. I think that's one of the most important skills that a candidate needs. Yeah. Do you think that in this, in the compressed timeline, when most of the money is going to be raised online, most of it's going to come out of, do you think that those skills matter as much?
Well, I think the way that I would say it at a presidential level, it's more coalition and relationships, right? That she was able to capitalize on coalitions and relationships right out of the gate. She had strong relationships that she had kept up, that she had engaged, that is a candidate skill. That relationship skill is like critical for candidates. She obviously is very gifted and has been very good in keeping strong relationships with people. And that really helped her at the beginning of this campaign.
Good. So jumping to the other side, I mean, it's obviously it's really hard to evaluate Donald Trump because, this is now his third presidential election in which he pretty much does everything that campaign consultants would probably tell a candidate not to do. And he always gets like 46 or 47% of the vote, no matter what he does.
Okay, so here, let me talk about this from a candidate training perspective.
Okay.
There are things that I think Donald Trump does well, right? He is defined, right? People know who he is and know what he stands for, right? You may not agree with it. You may not agree with the things he says, but if you're interested in immigration, if you're, interested in tariffs, the economy, right? You believe that he, he fights on those issues, right? That is, and so he will get a subset of people that, just believe in him for that. And he doesn't have to say much about it. That is part of his identity. And so he has created that identity. He has that identity, and he doesn't really have to do much to there's not a lot that he's going to break that mold.
Well, and I think importantly, he doesn't offer any specifics on those issues, but
Correct.
he raises the topic, and then, as you said, people think that they know that he's going to fight on it. So, trying to pin him down on the details of what, rounding up millions of people would look like, he just doesn't engage on it. And folks are willing to give him a pass there.
I mean, right. I mean, and so for his, 48% that, are locked in with him, they have that relationship with him. And so he's been, that is something that often candidates have a lot of trouble with, is defining who they are and getting people to know that definition of who they are. That is what I'll say Donald Trump has done, right? There's no question, or feel that what he stands for.
I mean, one of the things so 20 years ago, I was closely following when Arnold Schwarzenegger first ran for governor in California. And he struck me as someone who was very good at leveraging his previous fame and adapting it to politics. He gave the impression of someone who he knew enough about public policy that he could debate, he could hold a conversation about state politics. He knew what he was talking about, but also he was having fun with his persona as a celebrity. He was having fun quoting his movie roles. And I thought he threaded that needle pretty well. And I think Trump, never has really demonstrated a lot of policy chops, but he's also someone who spent a lot of time developing a public persona of himself and capitalized on that well when running for office.
That's
I mean,
right.
I don't know. And I don't know how much he still relies on his long-standing public persona and his work on NBC. He doesn't need to as a former president anymore.
Oh, but I mean, it's part of who he is and how he's defined. I mean, frankly, going all the way back to, whether it's the, birther claims or
Right.
the Central Park Five or, any of that. I mean, that is part of who he is. And, I just think that there's people who like that. Obviously I don't, right? But there's a subset of voters who do.
Do you think, is he demonstrating skills or approaches now that he hasn't in previous runs? Are there things he's doing better or worse than he's done in the past? Or do you think it's
If
basically
I
the
just
same
said
old, same
no,
old? Yeah, okay.
I feel like it's the same. I
Okay.
don't feel like it's much different than what we've had. I mean, they're yeah, but go ahead, John, please.
No, I say what's different about it is that there's less of it, and I think that's the most interesting sort of approach. What makes this run for Trump different? He's done about 1/3 the number of rallies that he's done in similar times in previous cycles, and part of me is like, oh, I remember when candidates being old and not energetic was an important issue that's fallen away. And I sort of want to complain about it on that way. But I do wonder if it's an intentional choice, right? That like Trump, as Joe was saying, people think that they know what he stands for. Does limiting exposure to that mean that there's less time to make a mistake? And do you think that there's some wisdom in that? Or is he being lazy and, just choosing to play golf? It's hard to decipher.
Listen, there are a lot of, there's a lot of decisions that campaigns make around this. I also will say with Trump, I also think that, I will say the safety issue too is like, I probably think they're doing, less appearances because of that too, which, I just, from my perspective, I think that Trump is a defined candidate. And yes, they're certainly making choices and decisions on, where he goes and how often he speaks. But I also think that, again, Harris and, her team are making the same decisions. And then I'll say the vice presidential candidates and, are being guided to, on the amount of time they're spending and what they're doing too. And we can pivot to and talk about them too, if you want.
Yeah.
I really want to talk about the vice presidentials, but actually I had one more question for you on Trump, and then we can move on. Do you think that there are, so I think one of the interesting things about Trump is how singular he is, right? Like we haven't seen a lot of people like him. Do you think there are valuable lessons that Republicans or Democrats or anybody who's out there could actually learn from Trump? Or is he, just by virtue of being a celebrity for so long, does he not have anything to teach other people?
Well, again, I think having a defined view of who you are is super powerful, good, bad, otherwise. And I think there's a lot that can be learned from that. A set of, issues or things that you like believe in and that are core. I think there are a lot of good candidates, right, who have used that too and can learn from that. I think that is powerful. So yes, I think there are things we can learn from it. I also think we can learn too that, it can be destructive as well. And that's a bad thing that we can, like that people can set aside a lot of bad traits because of personality.
Yeah. But let's stop talking about Donald Trump because enough people have spent enough time talking about Donald Trump.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the two VP nominees that we have, like if Harris is unknown, then Tim Walz is extra unknown, right? That I think there's a lot more that we can sort of dig into on the launch of those. Just big picture, how do you think that the two VP launches have gone?
I think the Walz launch has gone really, really well. I think that has been good. The empathy he has shown has been, amazing, right? And connective.
How do you think, given that both of these candidates were kind of selected for their, working class white in the upper Midwest ties kind of thing, at least on the Walz side, how has he been good at sort of communicating a vision of that?
I think that people don't know him, but people like him. Right. Mm-hmm. And they feel that empathy, that connection to him in a genuine way that comes across. I don't think they feel that with J.D. Vance. I don't think they get that. They certainly don't get warmth.
No, not warmth.
Right.
I mean,
and so I think that there is a connection, and I think they did the, I would say that, the Harris Walls team did a brilliant job of also like using like, social media and engagement and different clips to like connect that warmth to, and that averageness to people, and it really has stuck.
Yeah, no, and yeah, I'm a Minnesotan here, so I do know a lot more about Walls than most voters. So I think, yeah, I've got a little bit of a different perspective, but it's been fun to see the rest of the country get to know this guy and how authentic that he is stayed, right? That
Yeah.
the version of him that's being sold to the country is what people in Minnesota know, and I think that's great. I think Vance on the other side, it's been interesting. He's doing a lot of the things that Trump won't do. Particularly like, Vance is sort of the smartest guy in the room, and he wants to answer every question, and he ends up putting a lot of details on things that Trump has been smart enough to avoid, right? Like, JD Vance was talking about details of Republican healthcare policy, which is not something that they usually like. And it's been fascinating to watch, how much that's an intentional choice versus how much that's just he can't stop being who he is.
Yeah, I mean, I think he felt or feels that he was hired to be an attack dog, has played that role. I don't think that the average voter looks at them and he like passes the, hey, who would I want to have a beer test or an ice cream with, right? I mean, I think if it's that choice between like you want to go, and it used to be the presidential choice, right? Who do you want to have over for dinner, right? That used to be the like choice people would, make often about like the president that they're electing or the vice president. I think like people would love to have Tim Walz over at a barbecue. I think like I would only last in my grill about 3 minutes and he would take over, and that'd be fantastic, right? That would be great. I just couldn't see I don't know what my conversation at my grill with JD Vance would be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair.
I mean, and that's it. I mean, but I think a lot of this is that connection, that warmth, that empathy, and I think, in the candidate training world, right, it really is about how do you connect to people, and you definitely can see how Tim Walz makes a connection.
Yeah, I'm curious. Are there specific things that Walz is doing that you would recommend other candidates do? Like, I mean, not just about him, but are just like good skills in general to be deploying.
I mean, be nice to people. Yeah, let's start with that, right? Yeah. Like, run for the right reasons, right? Like, make sure that you like are talking about why you're doing what you're doing and showing your values in a connective way. I mean, all that he does. Yeah, and again, I will also say that I think Vance has not shown that in this vice presidential race.
Would you say that these kind of traits, these kind of skills, the sort of personal stuff, does this matter more as you go further down the ballot, or more at the top where it gets more attention? I
mean, I think it really matters when you start, right? I think it matters from the beginning. I think that, when people are voting for their, let's just take whatever the school board member, right? They want someone who they know, they trust, who's going to vote on the budget that they can talk to, that is going to be able to explain things to them, or they're, running for, city controller, or they want people that they can talk to and can explain things in a very easy way. So if you're running for county commission or city council or mosquito control board, you want someone that really can connect with you and explain things and in a very clear way. And you feel that connection and trust. And so I think it matters a lot.
I think one of the interesting things about looking at Harris in 2024 versus Harris in 2020 is, in 2020, she's trying to run a Democratic primary. This year, she didn't have to do it. I think on the other side, you look at JD Vance, a lot of the things that are off-putting, I think, to a general election audience played really well in a Republican primary. That he won a very contested, hard primary in Ohio back in 2022. How do you think about sort of what the different skills are to win a primary versus winning a general? Are they the same skills? Are they is one harder than the other?
I mean, I think ideology and connection to an ideological group matters more in a primary than necessarily in a general, right? That I think you're really engaging and connecting to a sort of pole of a party in a primary. And so that connection matters more. But I think the core skills of, being able to build a coalition, being able to show who you are and what you stand for, being able to craft a message and deliver that message, being, especially at the lower level, being able to do call time and stay on the phone and, all of that, have that discipline, all matters, primary, general, no matter what.
Yeah, I think being able to stay on the phone for call time is the single most important candidate skill that I know. And it also might be the hardest. It's one of many reasons I will never run for office, because I couldn't do it. And, I've managed campaigns and having to convince a candidate to spend, 9 hours a day, most days of the week, calling strangers and asking for money. Like, it is a hard skill to learn.
9 hours? Is that what you have to do?
I mean,
well, what I'll say is the best candidates, right, can do that in a connective, warm way, right? The best candidates are the ones who get you on the phone and you want to give them money, right? That you really do, and you're like, wait, don't get off the phone. Can I tell you 2 other people that you should call for money? Those are the best candidates, and they're candidates who will invest you in their mission, and you're like, I want to help you. I want to be a part of this movement. And those are rare candidates, but those candidates are amazing and do the best.
Good.
Yeah. No, and I think, I've worked with some great candidates who are great at call time, but, even the best ones are going to have a day where they get, 50 no's in a row, and it gets hard. It can grind you down.
Absolutely. No, it is real hard, and it is a real challenge and motivation. I mean, again, to anyone who wants to run for office, I mean, it is a very hard thing to do. I'm very lucky in that I've worked and trained a lot of folks to run and been a part of that in some way. But I will also say, like, I'm not running for office ever, right? But I am going to help as many people as I can and teach them how to do it. And I'm very lucky to have had that small role in doing that.
Well then.
Well, what an excellent segue to the most important part of our conversation, which is baking. We've heard a rumor that you have some expertise in both biscuits and pie crusts.
Yeah. Well,
which one do you want to start with?
Well, the first thing that I'll say is, so I used to have a cooking show in college.
Amazing.
And called the College Kitchen, that was at the American University, was on like closed circuit TV. And then I did these health segments that were on something called National College Television that were like 5 minutes long and were big. And all of it had the same premise, which is anything you could make in 2 burners, a toaster oven, and a microwave.
Wow.
And so
do any recordings exist from
they
that?
were destroyed in the fire that's happening in about 5 minutes after.
Okay, fair. Okay.
But
how convenient. Okay.
But yeah, I had like the fro. It was a thing, right? But you can tell I no longer have said fro. But it was fun to do. But yes, I love food. I like to cook. Most of the time I spend time smoking meat or braising meat is usually what I spend a lot of time cooking. So like that is either a braised brisket or a smoked brisket. And I can, give you recipes for the show notes if you would like. But I know your focus is much more on the baking portion of this.
It's true.
And so biscuits, I am partial to the Garden and Gun biscuit recipe. And what is really important about that recipe is you need full fat buttermilk. And so if you have full fat buttermilk, it makes amazing biscuits. And these biscuits are like sandwich biscuits. They're like, you can they hold together for you to put like a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich. It's pretty great. So I would highly recommend that recipe.
Excellent. My biscuit recipe, I freeze the butter and I grate it with a box grater. But I use reduced fat buttermilk, so maybe I should try the whole.
No, you need full fat. It's hard to find. And you may have to go to like an actual farm to find said full fat buttermilk, but you also can cheat and kind of put lemon juice in like full fat milk, but it's not as good. So find the full fat buttermilk and I will tell you it will. And I love the grated box grater butter. We'll do that. And then pie crust. I know you really wanted to know my tips for pie crust.
We need
and
to.
that
Please,
is
yes.
using sour cream or full fat yogurt, like a tablespoon in your crust, on top of the butter, will do wonders to your pie crust.
So you don't substitute for any butter, use all the butter, and then add a tablespoon of sour cream or something like
Correct. That's what I
that?
do.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm skeptical. I got to be honest.
Well,
Okay.
you will actually, there are many chat rooms about like pie crust, and you will see that there are these additions of yogurt or sour cream, and there's a back and forth on it. I like it a lot. It does wonders. It like, especially for like, I use pie crust for two basic things. One is for like pies, right? Apple pies, right? Is mainly what I make like during the winter, but then I also make quiches, right? And so because that is a great, like very like quick meal that you can make. So for either a pie crust for a pie, for a fruit pie, or for quiches, it really
It
does
works for
hold up
both.
very nicely.
For your crust, for the fat, do you just use butter, or do you sometimes mix it with lard or Crisco or anything like that?
I'm not, it's like I'm a Northeast Jew, and I,
Okay.
for whatever reason, don't mess around with lard. I probably should, but I have not like spent a lot of time focused on lard. Most of what I use is just butter.
Yeah, it works for me.
Yeah, no,
but
I'm a butter purist too. My mom makes pie
but I will
crusts
tell you, I have
with-
eaten pies with lard, which are amazing, right?
Oh,
I just
yeah.
have never made them myself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, my mom is a vodka and Crisco person, but the apple fell from the tree.
So
on that
talk
one.
about that. So you all were I was hearing this whole like vodka
Yes.
in the crust. I've never done
So
vodka
the
in the
theory
crust. I
is
have done vodka in my matzo balls, but not in the crust of
Oh,
pies.
So
Interesting.
the theory is that you want everything very, very cold where you're making a pie crust, and you can put vodka in the freezer and it will stay liquid longer than if you put just water in. So I think that the alcohol all burns off, but you can if you use super chilled vodka, it keeps everything colder a little bit longer. Is the theory. I find that it has a weird aftertaste, but Seth, you're a vodka guy, right?
I am, and so my understanding of the chemistry on this, and you're better trained on this than I am, but that it basically when you make the pie dough, the big thing is that you're mixing flour and water, and then you're letting it sit for a while. Is that helps bring it brings out gluten, which is what we want to like hold the pie crust together. But it can become chewy if there's too much gluten developed. And by replacing some of the ice water with vodka, that actually limits gluten production. So you get like it generates a really nice consistency, and like you say, the alcohol burns off. And if it's a decent vodka, like the best vodkas really don't taste like anything,
Right.
So you're not really getting much of a flavor there anymore. And I've found that I like the consistency there better than if I'm just using water. But I also might be like leading myself on.
Yeah, I will tell you that I have used vodka in replace of water in my matzo balls. And what I'll say is in my matzo balls, the other thing, and you can't do this in Passover because it's cheating, but is putting baking powder in your matzo balls also makes for a much like lighter matzo ball.
Baking powder.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is another
That is cheating
tip for
for
you.
Passover.
But
sure.
again, it depends on where you fall. Like some people will say that's a leavener, other people
That's a
won't.
leavener.
It's a thing. So
I mean, I know people who use like club soda in matzo balls.
so
and
again,
it just-
I will
yeah,
use club
yeah.
soda
Okay.
and baking powder in
Wow. Okay.
in the matzo balls, and it makes for a lighter matzo ball. And they will.
Well, if you have club
be
soda
bigger
and
expand.
vodka, then you also have a cocktail to go with your matzo balls. So you got everything you need, right?
Yeah,
We got a pretty. Honestly, we just have a martini with a matzo ball floating in it. Is that a thing? I'm gonna make that. Okay. A mazzatini.
mazzatini.
Yeah.
That's good. That's
All right.
fantastic.
Oh, we invented a cocktail today. This is wonderful.
That is
Okay.
awesome. Phenomenal.
All right. I think we'll call it there. Joe, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really useful conversation. We appreciate your time and expertise.
Well, listen, it's my pleasure. It's so great to talk to you both, and it's so great to get your political and baking tips as well. I have not really spent a lot of time on sourdough bread. I hear both of you have a lot of opinions on that, so would love to hear more about that at a
Yeah.
further time, but I appreciate it.
Excellent. And Joe, tell folks where they
thank
can
you.
hear your candidate training podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, the How to Win a Campaign, it's about, politics and advocacy. We have 4 seasons. You can check it out anywhere you get your podcasts. It's me and Martin Garcia, and we have a guest. Usually we also have, we just finished a, a 30 episode season that we have gone through, and we're going to be doing some fall episodes. Who knows? We may even publish this on our How to Win a Campaign channel. We'll see if people send me baked goods. Maybe I'll do that. But it is it's a fun conversation. Again, we have fantastic guests. We've had all sorts of folks talking about movement building and about running campaigns. It's really and just authors, influencers, those kind of folks who are interested in talk about politics.
Excellent. So yeah, check it out. How to Win a Campaign. Thanks, Joe.
How to Win a Campaign. We will post a link to that on our Substack page.
Yeah, and you also can check out the blog at thecampaignworkshop.com. We publish weekly, and that is every week we have something new there, so check that out. We also have, a dozen ebooks. We also have our 100 campaign tools list, which is a sortable list of campaign tools. So all sorts of things there at thecampaignworkshop.com.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, we will post links to all this. Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much for your time, and thanks to all who listened today. We do appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon with a new episode. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much for listening to Power and Flower. This episode was produced by Eli Maskett. We will be recording throughout this election season up until the November election.